For millennia, this was the only reality humanity knew. An existence governed by fear and myth, where truth was not sought with the mind, but received with reverence from the gods. But then, in a rugged, sun-drenched corner of the eastern Mediterranean, something happened. A spark in the darkness, a silent and audacious rebellion of the human mind. A group of humans dared to formulate the most dangerous and subversive question in history. What if it weren't so? What if the universe were not a divine whim, but a comprehensible order? What if truth were not in the temples, but within ourselves? This is not just the story of Greece. It is the story of how we learned to think. It is the chronicle of the birth of thought. Before there were philosophers debating the essence of being, there were warriors whose stories were forged in bronze and gold. On the volcanic islands of Crete, a sophisticated and peaceful civilization, the Minoans built labyrinthine palaces like that of Knossos, a place of legendary corridors and frescoes, showing men and women leaping over the backs of wild bulls. Their art, delicate and vibrant, and their trade dominated the Aegean Sea. But around 1500 years before Christ, this brilliant culture faded. A cataclysm, perhaps the devastating eruption of the Santorini volcano, plunged the world into a volcanic winter and tsunamis. Or perhaps the arrival of a new and warlike people sealed their fate. From the Aegean Sea, then emerged the Mycenaeans, a warrior people whose kings were buried with gold masks that the archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann, in a fit of romanticism, would call the Mask of Agamemnon. Their cyclopean fortresses with walls of such enormous stones that it was believed only giants could have raised them, like those of Mycenae and Tiryns, still dominate a rugged, dry landscape. It was they, perhaps, who fought in the legendary Trojan War, an epic conflict that one day, centuries later, a blind poet named Homer would immortalize in the Iliad and the Odyssey, poems that would become the cultural Bible of the Greek world. But around the year 1100 before Christ, this world of heroes and kings also collapsed. The palaces burned to the ground, trade routes were broken, the syllabic script, known as Linear B, was lost to oblivion. The Greek Dark Age began, a long silence of 400 years where history seemed to take a step back. The population decreased and life became smaller, more local and primitive. But in this very darkness, in this isolation, the seed of something completely new was germinating. Decentralized, separated by mountains and seas, the Greeks began to organize around a new concept: the poleis. The poleis, the city-state, was not just a place on the map. It was a revolutionary idea. A community of citizens, not of subjects, to govern the poleis, to make decisions about war and peace, to create laws and judge others. One had to persuade. One had to speak in public in the agora, the central space of the city. One had to debate, argue, use logic and reason. Rational thought became an essential tool for political and social survival. It was in this crucible of civic debate that philosophy could flourish. The stage was set for the first thinkers to appear, the first men who dared to seek natural explanations instead of divine ones. In the prosperous Ionian colony of Miletus, on the coast of what is now Turkey, a man named Thales asked the foundational question of Western philosophy. He did not ask, what God created the world? He asked, what is everything made of? What is the archa, the fundamental principle of all things? His answer, although it may seem strange to us today, was an intellectual earthquake. He said that everything proceeds from water. Why? Because water is essential for life. It can exist in 3 states: solid, liquid, and gaseous. And it seems to moisten everything. Thales did not offer a myth. He offered a natural From Ephesus, Heraclitus, known as the Obscure for his enigmatic aphorisms, saw a universe in constant change and tension. Everything flows, he said. You cannot step twice into the same river. For him, reality is not a static being, but a process, a perpetual becoming governed by a universal law he called the Logos. The conflict of opposites, war is the father of all things, is what creates order. The element that best represented this constant change was fire. At the opposite pole, the philosopher Parmenides from southern Italy asserted something radically different. Change, he said, is an illusion of our senses. True reality, the being, is one, eternal, indivisible, and unchanging. Being is, and non-being is not. Nothing can come from nothing. Reason for Parmenides tells us that the world is a perfect, solid sphere, and that our senses, which show us movement and multiplicity, deceive us. This dualism between reason and the senses would become a central theme in all later philosophy. Other thinkers continued the search. In Magna Graecia, Pythagoras founded a sort of school cult that combined mathematics, mysticism, and religion. For the Pythagoreans, all is number. They believed the universe was built upon numerical relationships, and that the soul was immortal, destined to be reincarnated. Their discoveries in geometry and music, such as the theorem that bears his name, convinced them that the cosmos was a harmonious and rational order. Empedocles, for his part, proposed that everything was composed of 4 roots: earth, air, fire, and water, combined and separated by 2 cosmic forces: love, which unites, and strife, which separates. Perhaps the most astonishing of all were Leucippus and his disciple Democritus. They developed the first atomic theory of matter. They postulated that the universe is composed of 2 things: the infinite void and an infinite number of indivisible and unchanging particles, which they called atoms, meaning uncut. These atoms, they asserted, move eternally in the void, colliding and combining to form all the objects we see. The differences between things are due to differences in the shape, size, and position of their atoms. It was an incredibly modern idea, a purely physical and mechanical explanation of reality, with no need for gods or intelligent forces. These first philosophers, the pre-Socratics, did not have all the answers. In fact, almost all of their theories were wrong, but their legacy was immense. They had changed the rules of the game. They had replaced "because the gods willed it" with "because." They had begun the search for truth through human reason. Science, logic, metaphysics, all were born from this audacity. While Ionia flourished intellectually, a power was emerging on the Greek mainland. Athens, after the devastating Persian wars against the vast Persian Empire, Athens, leader of the Delian League, entered its golden age, the 5th century BC. In the battles of Marathon, Thermopylae, and Salamis, a small alliance of Greek city-states had defeated the largest empire the world had ever known. This incredible victory instilled in the Athenians an unprecedented confidence. Under the statesman Pericles, the city became the undisputed center of the Greek world. Money from the Athenian Empire, which had evolved from a defensive alliance into an imperial dominion, financed the construction of a magnificent acropolis, including the Parthenon, a monument of Pentelic marble to the goddess Athena, and above all to the power and confidence of the city. But Athens's true monument was not made of marble, but of ideas. It was in this vibrant, competitive, and sometimes brutal democratic environment that one of the most influential figures in history appeared: Socrates. Unlike the previous philosophers who focused on the cosmos, on physis or nature, Socrates turned his gaze inward, toward the human being, ethics, politics, and knowledge. His interest was virtue. What is justice? What is piety? What is courage? And his method was revolutionary. He wrote nothing. He walked barefoot through the agora of Athens and, with an ironic humility, claimed to only know that he knew nothing. With clever and persistent questions, a method that would come to be known as the maieutic, or the art of giving birth. He helped others give birth to the truth they already carried within. He exposed the ignorance of those who thought themselves wise. Politicians, poets, artisans. This gadfly of Athens, as he called himself, became increasingly unpopular. He questioned traditions, cast doubt on democracy, and above all, shamed the powerful. But the glory of Athens would not last forever. Rivalry with the other great Greek power, Sparta, led to the catastrophic Peloponnesian War, a conflict that lasted nearly 30 years and devastated the Greek world. A terrible plague ravaged Athens, killing a third of its population, including Pericles himself. The war ended with the Athenian defeat, the end of its empire and its democracy. The city was plunged into despair, cynicism, and the search for scapegoats. In this climate of tension and trauma, it was easy to blame Socrates, formally accused of corrupting the youth with his teachings and of not believing in the gods of the city, introducing new deities. He was tried by a jury of 500 citizens. In his defense, narrated by his disciple Plato in the Apology, Socrates did not beg for his life. He argued that his mission was a service to the gods, and that an unexamined life was not worth living. He was sentenced to death by a narrow margin. In his cell, surrounded by his disciples, he drank the hemlock with a stoic calm, becoming the first martyr of philosophy. He died for his right to think, to question, to challenge the status quo. His legacy was not written by him, but by his most famous disciple, Plato. Plato was so traumatized by the execution of his teacher and by the fall of Athenian democracy that he deeply distrusted politics and the senses. For him, the world we perceive with our eyes and ears is only a shadow, an imperfect and changing copy of a superior, eternal, and unchanging reality. The world of ideas or forms, perfect justice, absolute beauty, the good itself, do not exist in this world, but as perfect archetypes in that other transcendent plane. In his famous Allegory of the Cave, described in his work, The Republic, Plato asks us to imagine prisoners chained since birth in the depths of a cave, seeing only the shadows of objects projected on a wall by a fire behind them. For them, those shadows are the only reality. Philosophy is the arduous and painful journey that frees a prisoner, allows them to leave the cave and behold the real world, the world of ideas illuminated by the sun, which represents the idea of the good, the source of all truth and reality. For Plato, philosophers, the only ones who have contemplated this truth, must be kings, the only ones capable of ruling the poleis with wisdom and justice. In his utopian republic, he described an ideal society governed by these philosopher kings with a rigid three-class structure: the philosopher rulers, the warrior guardians, and the producer artisans and farmers. He founded his academy in Athens, considered the first university in the West, a place dedicated to the investigation of that transcendent knowledge through mathematics, dialectic, and contemplation. But among his disciples in the academy was one who did not completely agree. His name was Aristotle, and although he was the student, Plato's most brilliant student, his thought would take a radically different course. Aristotle did not look to a separate world of ideas. For him, reality was here, in this concrete sensory world. The essence or form of a horse is not in a heaven of ideas, but within the horse itself. Aristotle was an empiricist, a tireless observer of the natural world. He studied and classified everything, from comets and planets to more than 500 species of animals, dissecting them to understand their anatomy and function. He invented formal logic, creating a complete system of deductive reasoning with its syllogisms as a tool for rigorous thought. To explain anything, he proposed that one had to identify its four causes: the material cause, what it is made of; the formal cause, its design or essence; the efficient cause, what made it; and the final cause, its purpose. He wrote on politics, comparing the constitutions of over 150 Greek city-states. On ethics, arguing that the goal of human life is eudaimonia, or human flourishing, which is achieved through virtue, defined as the mean between two extremes. On poetry, rhetoric, physics, and metaphysics, his system was so complete and overwhelmingly logical that it dominated Western and Arab thought for 2,000 years. But the central idea, the bold proposition that the universe is comprehensible and that the human mind has the power to comprehend it, survived and prospered. The story of humanity is a tapestry woven with countless threads of forgotten civilizations, revolutionary discoveries, and brilliant minds who dared to see the world differently. The birth of thought in ancient Greece is just one of those fundamental threads, a crucial chapter in the great chronicle of our species. But there are many more: lost empires beneath the sands of the Sahara, secrets hidden in ancient cuneiform texts, truths about our cosmic past waiting to be unearthed. On Ancient Truths, our journey doesn't end here. We believe the past is not a closed book, but a map that guides us towards the future. A map full of mysteries to solve and lessons to learn. We will explore the pyramids of Egypt, not just as tombs, but as machines for eternity. We will decipher the codes of the Maya and travel the Silk Road to connect the worlds of East and West. If this exploration of the origins of our thought has fascinated you, we invite you to join us on this ongoing adventure. Subscribe to Ancient Truths to continue unearthing the pillars upon which our world is built. Click the notification bell so you don't miss our journeys to the most forgotten and fascinating corners of history. Because to understand where we are going, we must first understand where we come from. The truth is waiting,